It's time for Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle.
Welcome on into another special edition of Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle. Joining me now live in their hotel room, and we apologize for the AC unit just deciding to stay on despite the fact we have turned it off. We appreciate you, Dalton, Hopkins, and Michael Massie joining us. Brian Nolan watching from Idaho. But fellas, glad to have you here. Dalton, your first day at the trial, so day 2 of this. Let's dive right in. Dalton, your first time going in, we asked Massie what it was like yesterday. Overall, the vibe, the atmosphere. Walk us through when you first walked in, what it looked
Well, when I first walked in, I'm going to be honest, we were not, a lot of the time we were stationed in the overflow room, which is kind of like this little pocket area that's off to the side, where they have a live stream, like this camera that's up top looking down at the courtroom. And we could just hear everything that was going on. We just heard all the voices and we kind of saw what was happening in the courtroom. So the vibe was quiet. But I will say that it quickly got, I want to say, contentious, because it was Denny on the stand at first. And it honestly, if I were to like illustrate the way that today felt, it felt like a very long episode of Actions Detrimental, because it probably about like a 4-hour episode of Actions Detrimental, just because Hamlin was up there for so long, and we had to hear his voice talking about what was wrong with the sport for so long. So that's kind of what the vibe felt like. And then later on, I felt like that things kind of calmed down a little bit when Scott Prime got on, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later on. But overall, day one kind of felt like that. It just felt like a long Denny Hamlin fest.
Yeah, and if you missed anything about what we talked about with day one and a little background of it, Massie, Tom Bowles, and I did that yesterday. It's on your podcast feed or on the YouTube stream as well. So if you missed that, overall, diving right in to this conversation with Denny Hamlin going on the stand. Massie, I'll go to you first. You were there yesterday for the start of it, where it seemed like it was very much background information. How quickly did it become contentious between Denny Hamlin and the lawyers? Was it as soon as the cross-examination began?
It really felt like right away. See, the funny thing is yesterday, because it was the plaintiffs, his own side asked him the questions. It was everything they could do to build him up. Today, it felt like it was everything they could do to tear him down. It was just all the questions were taking quotes he had said in the past about the next gen car, charters, and just taking and running the business, taking things to the most literal extreme and asking him about it. And like it got intense. There was one moment where like I thought Denny might just get up and punch Mr. Booterman. That was the guy asking the questions on NASCAR's behalf. I thought he would punch him out at one point, because he was asking Denny about appearances on like Kevin Harvick's podcast, which we're not going to say the name of that, or Kenny Wallace's, like instances where he spoke glowingly about NASCAR. And Denny was like, well, yeah, I spoke glowingly. Like I spoke rosy about it because they give you talking points that you got to say, promoting the change of racetracks and the next gen car, all that stuff. And he's like, if anytime I say anything negative, they're going to give me an angry phone call or call me to the hauler and yell at me. But the lawyer countered with, so you're saying that anything you say publicly, we can't believe you? And it was that kind of line of questioning, because later on he asked him, well, is there anything you say something in private, we can't believe that either. I will say, like, the lawyer did a great job with his line of questioning. Denny also did a great job. There were times where he probably overshared and kind of hurt himself a little, but for the most part, he had a comeback for like everything the guy threw at him. I don't know. I guess his legal team helped prep him up, but he did a really good job today. That was an entertaining part because both sides, you could tell, were really prepared, really on their game, and it was just like a fun little, word of mouth battle, I guess you could say.
Dalton, let's go back to the second half of the Denny Hamlin testimony from the team side. And I'm going to use the teams going forward because 2311 obviously is kind of the face of this, but FRM is still there. Part of an interesting point he brought up was about the sustainability of staying with the current or the charter system if they just signed the latest charter agreement. Can you go into more detail about kind of what they were talking about there from like the business side of things? That seemed to be the focus of at least what they were asking Denny in his testimony.
Yeah, I think one of the prime arguments I think NASCAR was trying to make is that 2311 was still making a profit. Like they were almost kind of like what Massie was saying. It was almost felt like they were trying to discredit him in a lot of instances. It kind of felt like they were trying to say, well, you're complaining about how your teams aren't making any money, and that's why you didn't sign the charter agreement. But at the same time, look at what has happened. Look at what you have built over the last few years. Look at all the money you've spent in the last few years trying to build 2311. They built airspeed. They bought a third charter, and they harked on those a lot. And even a couple emails from Curtis Polk that straight up said that Denny Hamlin is known for spending frivolously. He spends a lot of money, but I think that might have been that probably was their best argument that they had against Denny. But a lot of it really was contested pretty quickly by Denny. A lot of it just said that, like, for instance, one of the things was said was you spend this much money on furniture at airspeed, and and I think it was like 17% of the team's revenue was spent on events for 2311 holiday parties, yeah. Events that's the way that they worded it. And Denny responded with, yeah, I take care of my people. So it was minor things. It was things like that NASCAR, I think, was trying to do. It wasn't really so much as trying to say, look, the argument just seems to be like, look at what Denny spends a lot of money. Like, of course he is going to claim that he's losing money because he spends a bunch of money. So I felt like that was probably the main point they were trying to get at.
Yeah, one point brought up, and y'all did a great job on Twitter at Pint Lane CPT and at _Massie22. Want to plug both these guys throughout the day, and they're going to miss some stuff when we go over tonight. That's why I'm here to back them up, because they're taking information basically through a fire hose without their cell phones. They have to go old school, pen and paper. Boys, I have your back. I'm also doing pen and paper throughout this process for you. But I thought a really interesting note in there about the Curtis Polk email was basically Denny just said, yeah, that's his job. Essentially put that is Curtis Polk's job to keep him in check. It's why he brought there. But when Jeffrey Kessler, the lawyer, was talking to Denny Hamlin, another quote he brought up about this specific charter agreement is Denny mentioned they were not going to stay in business for 10 more years. Mm-hmm. It was very fascinating. It seems to me that Denny, while Curtis Polk and even MJ to some degree, we talked about yesterday why MJ and Bob Jenkins are so inept at this case because of their backgrounds. MJ being on the sports franchise side, Bob Jenkins being on the restaurateur or fast food franchise side. But Denny's really seems to me his role in this is the connecting between the antitrust and how it's not supposed to run and the actual minutia that is NASCAR, if that makes sense. Do you feel like that's why a big reason why Denny went first is to kind of give the jury an understanding of how this sport operates?
Yeah, and Denny's he's probably the most human element where the jury will probably relate to him more than anyone else on their side.
Michael Jordan?
Yeah, because how you going to relate to MJ? And Curtis Polk is probably going to use a lot of fancy language. He's a smart
Bob Jenkins seems relatable, at least. He's a businessman.
Sure. Yeah, and Bob, I think Bob will do well as well. But it's just, I mean, they call him up first because they want him there for the whole trial. But it does help, I think, to have him like the first day shedding tears. The second day he's just throwing down. It wasn't at all like the second testimony we saw. We'll get into, but like the fact that like he went tit for tat with this guy, with Mr. Butterman, and like at one point Denny was pointing out that that the charter agreement's for 7 years, but then there's an extension after that. And that's the part that he was scared of most. And because he was pointing out that they can lock you into the same thing they're paying now. They don't have to increase it. So he was trying to say that, if NASCAR doubles what they're getting the media rights the next time, they could still pay the teams the same thing. Mr. Bruderman came in with, there is a guarantee that it won't go down. It's got a floor for it. And Denny hit him with a great comeback of, oh, great. So you're saying if they double the money, you won't decrease us any. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was the one time, like, it's like he was saving that the boxer just like doing the rope-a-dope, and then at the end of it, he finally just landed a big blow. So
we have some good comments. And again, you mentioned you were in the overflow area, so I don't know if you were able to like fully get a sense of the jury. But the Stig asked, how did the jury take that holiday party jab? We're gonna ask more about the jury as we go throughout this process. But in that particular moment, did you get a sense of how the jury felt about that?
I'll be honest, I didn't really see a huge reaction from most of the jury. At the end of the day, we were in the courtroom, but there wasn't a huge. I think the only time the jury was actually involved was I think somebody kicked a cord out of the socket, and all their screens went blank, so they had to take like 2 minutes to replug it back in. It was nothing. So there wasn't. I didn't see a huge reaction, even when I was in the courtroom itself. It didn't seem like there was a huge reaction coming from the jury side.
The funny thing is, in the overflow room, when you're in the actual courtroom, there's like no reactions or anything. In the overflow room, you hear people like, "Oh," reacting like you really would. But the jury.
Well, the overflow room is just like live Law and Order, basically, because you're not in the courtroom.
It was way better. Like I might go there next time as well because it was comfier seats. You weren't sitting in a wooden pew the whole time. I felt like I could see the jury better sitting in there because yesterday sitting there in the courtroom, you got like MJ sitting in front of you. You can't see what's in front of you. It's all these people just blocking the view of the jury. So I had a better view of them today than I did of yesterday. I will say though, if you took 9 cardboard cutouts and put them in that jury box, I wouldn't know the difference. they react that little to it.
So that brings up to Rima's question. You can answer this quickly, and we'll keep going with Denny's testimony. Were they taking notes, or were they just kind of locked in on what was going on?
I saw a few taking notes. Some others that looked like they were staring off into who knows where they were at mentally. So I think a couple are doing due diligence at the least.
Let's go to the first person. If you had a bingo card of like the first non-related person brought up in this court case to like the actual court case, so I'm not including NASCAR team owners or anything, it's good old Kenny Wallace.
Oh my God! I have in my notes, like as the moment he was mentioned, I wrote Kenny Wallace mentioned in capital letters, just right there.
So I that appearance, and Dalton, you can ask about this. I thought Denny's response in particular was kind of unique because we'll just say a person on this panel or in this conversation could relate to his answer.
Wait, I don't remember his answer.
Oh, I got it. So he said, anytime I say anything negative, I get a phone call. Was his answer. Which, if you know about frontstretch.com and certain phone calls Michael Massie would get.
If you know anything about being involved in NASCAR, period, that's not just a driver thing. That's not even just a media thing. That's just being a part of the sport. That's honest. You're going to get a phone call if you say something bad.
I posted that, and the reaction to people responding to it saying like, yep, that's it happened to me or whatever.
Mm-hmm. People
it's
sharing like their Me Too stories, like about getting angry phone calls from NASCAR leadership if they say something bad, even if it's not bad, if it's just something that could be perceived as negative against the sport.
So overall, you look at Denny's testimony, and obviously you mentioned it was contentious today. There's a great video, Dalton, you got of him walking out of the courtroom saying, "Good, I'm good." You would have to assume, obviously the prep came into this, but Denny knew what he was doing. Overall, it was 4 hours total on the stand between both days, if I'm not mistaken. It seems to me that obviously we're going to get to what I think might be the more, I don't want to say the contentious side of things. You'll have better perspective of this when we get to the Scott Prime coming up. But ultimately, how do you think Denny handled the cross-examination in terms of basically, I don't want to say who won the round, because we're not going to know. It's not like the jurors are like going 10-8, 10-9, what, like in a boxing match.
Mm-hmm.
But overall,
Right.
do you think that Denny handled himself enough to where his testimony will carry weight throughout the trial?
I think the tier starting off the trial with tears like he did yesterday, I think that's gonna hit pretty hard with the jury. It's a good start. But we were talking about this in the car ride on the way, the hour-long car ride, thanks, Brian, back to our hotel. But we were talking about how comparing like how we thought Denny was going to do and how he did kind of compared to Scott Prime, who, like you said, we're going to get to. But we both agreed it kind of felt like he did a decent job. I felt like, at least, I think, and I'm sure Massie agrees, like it felt like he was ready for this. Like he wanted to do this really bad. It almost felt like that maybe that's why he went first. Is like he just wanted to do it, because it felt like he was prepared for a lot of the things they were going to ask him. Some things he got tripped up on. Some things he said a little bit more than he should have said. But that was just it. Is that he wasn't just deflecting the questions. He answered a lot, very long-winded answers. Like I said, it almost felt like a podcast episode. And I can't help but feel like that he probably did some sparring sessions with Kessler, and whereas Kessler was just kind of preparing him for some of the questions he was probably going to be asked. So I think Denny knew that it was probably going to come to this for a long time, and he's been preparing for this for a long time.
Yeah, it was one of you that tweeted this was a longer episode of Action Detrimental, basically, is how you summarized Denny's. Was it Massie or Dalton? I can't remember.
That was me, but
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying my best to follow you guys throughout the day. Like, come on, man.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I was gonna say that, like, he was very mature, is I think the best way to put how Denny was today. He never lost his cool. He took his time they'd ask him about a document, and he'd be like, hold up, I'm gonna read this document first before he just spouted off some answer. He'd ask the guy to repeat the question so he could just clearly understand and have a clear, concise answer. I think they worked with him on that. But he did a really good job. And there were moments where, later on in the Prime testimony, Kessler had to do a lot of digging to get answers. With Denny, there were moments where the defendant's NASCAR side, Mr. Budeman, wanted to cut him off and move on to the next question. And Denny was like, no, I need to set this straight. And the judge allowed him, and, he would give like a great plea for why, he believed for what he believed. So, yeah.
Speaking of the judge, was there a lot of objections and sidebars? Like,
you want me to answer that, or
you go for it?
So no sidebars today, but objections. There were a few. There was one that occurred during Scott Prime that we need to go over.
So we'll save that.
We'll get to that. But yeah, when it came to Hamlin, there was I wasn't keeping count, but I want to say it was about like 3 or 4 objections that occurred. I think all of them were overruled by the judge. Can't remember if any of them were kind of stood out with Hamlin.
Yeah.
I think it was just Hamlin's attorney team just trying to, help him in any way. But I still feel like that Hamlin got out of most of those situations pretty fairly well. I didn't really see anything that was I didn't really see anything that occurred that was absolutely damning toward him.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this special edition of Bringing the Heat. Bringing the Heat 2311 FRM versus NASCAR lawsuit special. Day number 2, reacting to it. Dalton Hopkins, Michael Massie. We're live in the courtroom. I'm Trey Lyle. And again, we appreciate everyone watching. If you can like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, or wherever, if you're watching this on Facebook, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button there. But going back to the questions before we keep going on with Denny Hamlin's testimony, there's a couple good ones here. Massie, you're day 2 at this. The Stig asked, Judge Bell, your impersonation of them so far. How do you sense how the judge is handling this? It seems like the judge has done, at least it knows what they're doing throughout this entire process. But overall, as the trial is going on, what have you thought of the judge?
I think he's fantastic. He's very quiet today. He didn't say a whole lot. But he very much likes to let things play out and see. I think he's very curious where you're going with this. You know, he wants to see before he's going to cut anything off. I think that if he were in charge of this and not the jury, he would be ruling a certain way right now based on kind of the body language, some of the stuff he said. But he's not in charge of who wins the case. But still, he's very fair. He's funny. He gives some good, today, like you said, there weren't as many remarks, but it was just a lot going on, and he didn't have a need to jump in really.
One more question, and then we'll go back to it because Ronnie asked a really good one. You're there with the media contingent. It seems a lot more in the NASCAR bubble than outside. I think the most notable piece from outside of this is Ryan McGee writing a piece for ESPN, which Denny Hamlin was something
not happy with. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. But why do you think the big media coverage is not really covering this? It hasn't really been talked about ESPN. It really is inside the NASCAR bubble, and I think about it more of just imagine going up to a random person and just saying, hey, Michael Jordan is suing a sport. Essentially put is what's going on.
I don't know why they got. I think just NASCAR doesn't move the needle anymore. People just don't care about it. I mean, Ryan McGee wrote that article. I haven't seen him there either day. Where's he at?
Yeah.
It's only a handful of The Athletic has both their guys there, Gluck and Bianchi. Bob Pockers is there for Fox Sports. Adam Stern with the Sports Business Journal.
There was a humorous moment where Adam Stern was sitting literally right next to me, and they brought up one of the pieces of evidence was a tweet between Denny Hamlin and Adam Stern, and they brought it up, and I'm like,
yeah.
It's the meme from the movie with Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think is.
Yeah.
So, but that was a great question there, Ronnie. I wanted to get to that. All right. Anything we missed that you wanted to bring up about the Denny Hamlin testimony before we flip? Go ahead.
I actually have a couple notes that I did want to mention. Some interesting tidbits that I wrote down. This is on my Twitter also, but I do just want to mention in the podcast just so it's here on the podcast. One of the things that I thought was probably one of the bigger points, and this actually does carry on into the prime examination, which was Hamlin mentioned that towards the end of his cross-examination, Hamlin mentioned that a number of teams actually did do the research into creating a new racing league, but they couldn't because there was no, and I quote, there was no access to racetracks, especially those that were owned by NASCAR. So we'll get into the prime part, but that was one of Kessler's probably his biggest point he was making with Prime. By Prime, I don't mean Amazon Prime, by the way. I'm talking about Scott Prime. Did you have anything you wanted to mention?
There's some financials that don't really have much bearing on the case, but it's interesting. We never hear the financials in NASCAR. So the fact that Denny Hamlin makes around $14 million a year from Joe Gibbs Racing, I would guess he's one of the highest. I mean, he's one of the highest paid drivers he might be the highest paid driver.
I think he
But
is.
just comparing that to, I saw Joe Strigley put out a post that like Max Verstappen makes $65 million a year. So like
Lewis Hamilton makes 90, isn't it? 90 from Ferrari,
I don't
something
know.
crazy like that.
he
Probably.
was on that post that Joseph put out. I don't remember what the number was, but yeah, it's like those. They don't come close. Denny, the NASCAR guys don't come close.
60 million US.
60 million.
My bad. All right.
Okay. The other thing was just that Denny hasn't, like, he owes Michael Jordan money. It's basically he's put down 10. He's only invested. He said that he's invested 45 million, but he's only put 10 million down so far. But he owes MJ 35 million. So basically, he's going to be paying it back. The other thing is that they don't own the property that Airspeed, like 2311 doesn't own the property Airspeed is on. MJ and Denny own that together, and they pay $1 million a year lease to those guys. So that was a real, that was one of the things where I'm like, okay, NASCAR has a good point on that. That's a little odd that, because he's like, that's $1 million there going from one hand to the other.
Another point that I actually just found, I literally just found as you were saying that, that I wrote down is toward to NASCAR's credit, which was Denny. Buterman said he brought up the fact that 2311 actually pays its drivers a lesser percentage of its revenue than NASCAR does to the teams, and the comparison is that 2011 pays its drivers 22% of its revenue, whereas NASCAR pays the teams 25%. Hamlin's rebuttal to that, which was that they have costs incurred that prevents them from paying more, and that's fair because and it's fair to him because in his words, 2311 is not a monopoly. And that if a driver didn't like what they were being paid, they have options. They can go to another team. Corey Heim was brought up. Corey Heim's contract was brought up today. He can go to another team if he wants to. If he didn't like the what he was being paid, and of course his argument to the whole case is it's not the same for NASCAR. It's not right for NASCAR to do that because it's a monopoly. That's his argument.
Seems pretty straightforward because theoretically, if they lose this case, Tyler Reddick can leave to go sign for another team. I mean, I guess theoretically you could do it right now because they don't have a charter, but theoretically he could do that.
Reddick went there because they offered him more money than RCR was offering him.
Yes, and so on and so forth. All right, so anything else from the Hamlin testimony, or were you going to move to what I thought was the fun part, which was learning more about the NASCAR side?
I don't know that it was that fun to watch. It was pretty torturous.
Okay, let's start big picture, and then we can go into the details. You said it was torturous to watch. Overall, so Scott Prime is the first witness from the NASCAR side of things. He's the chief strategy officer, for whatever that means.
He's got a couple titles, but that's the one that I held on to. Yeah.
What was your sense of maybe when he got on the stand, how it started, how it went for him on this side of things?
Let me say this first.
Go.
The exact opposite of Denny Hamlin.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
He looked like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
He looked like a guy who'd never spoken in public before, that all of a sudden they said, they threw him out there. And I feel like the lawyers were like, just don't tell him anything. And that's what he did. He didn't tell him anything. He didn't answer a single. Okay, he answered some questions. Yeah. But the man was defensive the whole time. Like, even simple questions, he wouldn't just, that weren't incriminating or anything, he wouldn't just give a straightforward answer to. Everything was, I don't remember. I don't recall. Hey, I don't know about that. It was so frustrating. And I don't know how Jeffrey Kessler held it together, but the man just hounded him question after question for hours.
Literally hours. Yeah.
I'm going to be hearing Kessler's voice in my dreams tonight.
We have a thick New York accent in our heads right now. We're going to be going to sleep to it in our head. I just want to say, like, in a less animated way, the way I put it on Twitter was he was very, very conservative with his answers. You could tell he was kind of walking on eggshells a little bit. And we spoke to some other reporters afterward, and we all kind of agreed that it was almost to his detriment. And when I say that, I mean, if you're in the jury and you're not a NASCAR fan, you don't know a whole lot about Denny Hamlin, you don't know a whole lot about NASCAR or any of this charter business or anything about what's going on. If you see Denny Hamlin go up and pour his heart out, literally cry and give these long-winded answers, if I'm a juror, I'm thinking, okay, this guy he's not hiding anything. He's clearly just trying to explain everything. And then if I see somebody like what Scott Prime did today, be very defensive about a lot of questions that, like Massie said, really you didn't have to be defensive about. I'm thinking, in not answering a whole lot of questions, I'm thinking that looks kind of guilty. And that's just me being like putting myself in that perspective. It's not a good look if you are refusing to answer those questions. A lot of them, because it's not like he was refusing to answer them. It was just, oh, I don't recall this. I don't know. I don't want to put myself in that. I don't want to make it. I don't want to, like, it was very, very like, stop asking me this question. Just move on. It kind of felt like that. It felt a little bit too defensive.
Okay. Let's get into this.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dalton, both of you guys did a really good job today. Make sure you follow both these guys on Twitter throughout the day at @Massie22 at Pit Lane CPT. We're here listening to special edition of Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle. I'm Trey Lyle. 2311 FRM versus NASCAR lawsuit special, day number dose of this trial. Dalton, let's go into particulars of this testimony from NASCAR Chief Strategy Officer Scott Prime. You talk about the contingency plans that teams that NASCAR seem to have if teams were starting their own series. What did you think about that? Where, talking about locking up facilities for cup level events, so on and so forth. When that part of the testimony, I know Liv has been brought up, F1 was brought up as part of it. What were your thoughts on that part of the testimony?
I think there were two really main arguments come to mind when I think of Kessler and Prime, and you mentioned the teams, the contingency plans, and that's what I mean when I said earlier that they were talking about teams trying to researching into forming another a series, and of course that meant that SRX got brought up as well, and some of the conversations that occur with NASCAR leadership with that and what to do with it. But yeah, one of the risks or one of the worries was that, and if you ask Scott Prime, there wasn't any worry, but Kessler kept questioning that there was, and one of it was that a team could go break off and start its own series, and NASCAR, I think the mitigation attempt was to try to get in touch with SMI and SMI have an agreement with NASCAR that no other series could race at those tracks. And obviously, all the other tracks on the circuit, they don't have to worry about because they're owned by NASCAR. I mean, most of them are, not all of them, but most of them. So if I wrote down somewhere that SMI was actually interested in hosting SRX events, but NASCAR's agreement would not let them do that. And obviously, the argument with Kessler and Hamlin and 2311 and FRM is that NASCAR is a monopoly. Well, that piece of evidence that was brought up kind of supports that argument, in that they're trying to lock up all these tracks and make sure that no other series can exist. And obviously, they felt threatened with SRX enough to make that agreement. I'll leave it with that if you want to say anything.
Well, so he kept asking him about the track agreements, and I thought there's one point that's pretty interesting. If I heard this right, it was that they were pointing out all the benefits of locking up the tracks. Just how it's good for the track, good for this and that. But the slides that they, were part of the evidence, there were 2 points on them.
And the slides, sorry to interrupt, the slides were text messages between Steve O'Donnell.
It was emails. It was communication. It
Yeah,
was emails and text messages. Yes.
From Steve O'Donnell, Scott Prime, and
multiple people. Scott Prime, O'Donnell. I think
NASCAR people. We'll just say NASCAR people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the 2 points weren't about the benefits to them. They weren't like from a good place. It seemed like one of them was to stop like other competitive stuff from happening at these places. The other one was to get the tracks to spend money investing, whereas they're just locked in for 1 year. They might invest, which does make sense, but it's like they're coming from 2 negative places in that situation, and it just, in a bigger picture, it doesn't. When there's all these other benefits that you could be arguing for locking in with tracks, that's the 2 points that were in these messages that were put in the trial. And the other thing, Kessler kept just grilling him about how much he knew about the lockdown of the tracks. And, he brought up a point of like, you guys are paying SMI this money to lock out, not have anything else there. Meanwhile, like IndyCar is getting paid by tracks to go there because they're not locking them out. So it's like that you're costing yourself money instead of bringing in money just to stop other stuff from happening, which is a weird thing. But so he kept on just asking about Scott Prime's involvement in this whole deal. And then finally Scott said that, he just put the slides together was all he did. He didn't know about all that stuff. He just put the slides together for the presentation, put some other info in there, but he had no dealings with it. And so Kessler asked him, how much money do you make? And he was saying at the time, in that job he was in before he got promoted, now he's been promoted to the chief strategist officer, but he was making $250,000. Now he's making $400,000. And this guy is sounding like he has no idea about the strategy, chief strategy officer now. And the guy sounded like he had no clue what strategies of the sport were. So it made it sound like Kessler essentially called him like a glorified secretary. It was like, $250,000.
Yeah, I think he made the point. $250,000 to staple papers together. I think that was the quote that was used.
Oh, and reminder, folks, like the point that 2311 is going to keep grilling. Like we want to keep revisiting. Like, why is this happening? Why are the two sides? What are the two sides arguing? The teams are arguing that NASCAR, as a monopoly, which has already been deemed by the judge, is abusing its power to the teams, which we'll talk about. Let's just say some people feel like that might be, based off the testimony so far, leaning that way.
It doesn't matter what we think. We can just quote what has been said in the courthouse.
Versus
exactly what we're doing.
Versus what NASCAR is arguing, that at the end of the day, this is just contentious contract negotiations. And 2311 always wanted to get to litigation, and we weren't going to let it happen. And there's no antitrust issue here at all. And we can talk about the effects from that. I think we should save that. But that ultimately is the argument, which is what we want to remind folks as you're listening to this. What frame everything you hear from Dalton and Massie in that context. Then it at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But let's get back to the Prime testimony. Massie, you can go first on this one. You mentioned how Kessler kind of was grilling Scott Prime throughout. And what would you expect as we head into the cross-examination portion from NASCAR? Do you expect what would you expect from NASCAR in terms of framing, I guess, Scott Prime's role in NASCAR? Because currently, I guess, Kessler has framed it as, intern or secretary or the staple boy. Like, what do you think NASCAR's strategy will be coming tomorrow with the cross-examination?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure. I'm sure they're going to give him a list of talking points and kind of set him up like Denny was with when his side was asking him questions. But I mean, when you've just basically said like I don't know to all this stuff, how can you then turn around and praise, like, say your involvement in doing this or doing that?
The worst part is that now the jury is going to go home and have all that marinate in their heads. Everything that's happened in the last 4 hours marinate in their heads before going into the home.
By that, actually go home. They're not sequestered. We confirmed that, right? We mentioned that yesterday. They are not sequestered.
Yeah, they're just going home.
Okay.
If they are being sequestered, I haven't heard anything about it.
I think it would be mentioned at the top of the trial. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm almost positive that would be the case. And for folks out there, sequestered basically means in the really big trials that the jurors to have prevent any outside influence whatsoever, basically are locked in a hotel room for the entirety of the trial and just taken to court every day. So
yeah, I think the judge was basically because at the end before they dismissed him, he just said, "Hey, don't do any research," and like that was about it. Like, don't do stuff on your own, because if you do and we find out, we got to start this all over again. So that was the point.
And then Dalton and Massie will be stuck in another hotel room again. And but anything else before we look ahead for the rest of the trial that we might have missed that you found fascinating by the first half of the Scott Prime testimony?
Yeah, a couple things.
I know Dalton has some things in the chamber. That's why I've teed him up.
So all right, I'll let you tell the objections.
Okay.
Because I know you want to tell it, but I just want to say that there was another. I mentioned the 2 points I thought illustrated what was going on, and I mentioned the first one being the contingency plan for a rival series being started up by drivers and teams. But the other point that was being made was the comparison of the share of revenue that NASCAR is giving its teams, comparing it to other, not just motorsports, but sports in general. F1, of course, was mentioned, the Concord Agreement, which is publicly known that the F1 teams, all 10 of them, get 50% of the revenue and shared among all 10 teams. So do the math, that's 5% of the revenue for each team. It's 50% of the revenue divided among all 10 teams. And then Live Golf, Live Golf and PGA Tour was also mentioned. How much money they get from the revenue from the sanctioned body revenue, and then comparing it all to NASCAR, which is I've heard a bunch of different numbers, but I heard from like 20 to 25 to 30%. But really, what you just need to know is that it's less than 50, right? And of course, there were arguments that, well, F1 is a different sanctioned body and NASCAR is not the same thing, and there's a lot of different things that were said by both Kessler and Prime. But really, that was the main argument presented by Kessler, is that F1 is this racing sanctioning body, and the teams are getting 50%. Why can't NASCAR do the same? And then, that the arguments followed after that. And then one of the pieces of evidence that I thought was kind of a little damning, and I kind of feel bad for Scott Prime in this sense, in that one of the pieces of evidence that was sent in an email from Prime to, I believe it was O'Donnell, which was by Prime regarding the split the revenue share between us. They have a point, and this is by they, I mean the NASCAR teams, mentioning the revenue share. Between us, they have a point on the industry revenue splits, and of course, Prime saying that there is a point there that they're being made. The Prime email claims that the Cup teams are getting 30% of the revenue and 50% for the F1 teams. So that's it almost makes me feel like that maybe Prime didn't fully agree with what was going on. Of course, that's just speculation, though. And then there was another moment that occurred later on regarding there was a question that Kessler was asking Prime.
Yeah. I will elaborate real quick. That whole thing with Prime, it seemed like what Kessler was hinting at was that it was a meeting. It was them talking after a meeting with Jim France. It was the two Steves, O'Donnell and Phelps. and Prime. I can't remember if there was somebody else in there or not, but they were all complaining. That's the one where you may have seen the text where it's like F the teams. We're going back to O'Donnell said we're going back to like 1985 or 96, whatever it was. And just speculating. Okay. And Kessler was kind of doing the same. It felt like those guys were trying to do right by the teams in that, but that it was Jim France that was holding it back. Kessler said there were 4 major pillars of what they wanted in the new charter deal, and they got 0 of them. So that was the big thing. But then Kessler eventually he asked Prime. He said he's like, can you take the charters away? And Prime was just kind of like hemming and hawing. He goes, can you take the charters away? I want to say he smacked the table. Yeah. He goes, can you take the charters
he
away?
He basically got like onto the mic.
Yeah.
And
so this was the you can't handle the truth
moment
of this
game. It kind of felt like that. And honestly, like, this makes me think that Kessler is almost trying to be entertaining. And I think that the strategy there is that maybe that'll make his case more appealing to the jury.
Seriously. Well, anyway, so he yells that 3 times. The other side, NASCAR's side, their lawyer objects. And the Judge Bell goes, overruled. He's not answering the question. Say yes or no.
Yeah.
So you could tell at that moment, Bell had had enough of him just beating around the bush, not answering anything. And he said yes. They can take the charters away. But yeah, I almost wish he had Bell saying that for every question on the
By the way, A Few Good Men is the movie, if anyone didn't know that. Just saying. Matthew Jansen here, before we continue, does ask, will the judge apply law or feelings to this case? Haven't heard anything illegal that NASCAR has done as the owners. And then he adds a line here. He kind of corrects himself. Or the jury. I guess not. The judge legally is a non-starter. Matt, basically what the judge is here to do. So the jury will basically needs to find 51%. And we had more context to this yesterday in the background, like day 1, where Tom, Massie, and I did a lot of background, but essentially put, the jury basically needs to find one side 51% to 49%. If they deem that NASCAR has abused its power to like a 51% yes, then basically the judge can come in. So they will, it's not guilty because it's a civil case. They'll just find them. They violated antitrust law. Like Jim France ain't going to jail because of this. And then the Judge Bell, will have to remedy that as whatever it may be, which could be all the way from the France family having to completely divest everything in NASCAR to permanent charters with X amount of revenue. Like the judge, and he said this, has free reign to basically do whatever they want. And that is kind of the biggest looming cloud in all of this is we don't know the true outcome of this court case at this point because of the ambiguity. I can't say that word. The kind of unanswered questions we'll have, and we won't even have that till, like, let's just say the teams win this case, till the judge determines the punishment. But let's continue here. Did I miss anything in that, guys? Y'all are actually in the courtroom.
I'm sure there's stuff we'll think about afterwards, but I think we hit on the big stuff.
I have literally, I think, 8 pages of notes. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to be able to
I'm working on page 5 or 6, and I wasn't even in the courtroom, and I'm just trying to help you guys out. So, but let's talk about tomorrow. So Scott Prime, we kind of sort of talked about. We don't expect much in terms of, I guess, like, substance from him is a good way to put it. Is it true? So someone tweeted that the teams are going to call Richard Childress to the stand.
Yeah,
is that happening tomorrow?
I have no idea.
I don't, because everything's taking longer than it should.
Okay,
we're on the second witness, and we're 2 days in.
And there's what, up to 12?
Something like that.
I think there's more.
More than that, maybe. Yeah.
So I will ask the same question I asked yesterday to Massie, and I'll give it to both of you. day 2 vibe check. Where do you sense on what side has the upper hand? Where's this case kind of going? And add context to what you expect tomorrow.
I thought it was a little even through the first half of the day, and then I thought 2311 front row took a big advantage at the end of the day after the Scott Prime deal. That's just my, like Dalton was saying, if I'm a jury sitting there watching this guy dodge all these questions, then I'm thinking he's up to no good.
Yeah, I think I echo that. I think maybe 2311 had a little bit of an I'll take that back. They were pretty even in the first half of the day, especially during the cross examination. I feel like Hamlin and Boonerman had a pretty kind of healthy back and forth. There was quite a few moments where they were going back and forth, and I feel like Boonerman made some pretty solid points that were supporting NASCAR's argument. Denny made a couple as well, and then when it got to Prime and it got to Kessler, it's one of those lopsided boxing matches where it was just it was a heavyweight versus, I don't mean this literally, of course, but it was a heavyweight versus a lightweight. Obviously a guy like Kessler, who is, well known, he's a, world famous lawyer for sports, and whereas Prime is probably not very used to this at all. So it definitely felt a little lopsided toward the end. I felt like Kessler did a really solid job explaining his argument.
Just to add more context for tomorrow, Jeff Gluck did mention that Bob Jenkins appears to be the next witness in the case. Do want to ask you guys, y'all have been paying attention to the jury, body language of the jury. Are they buying kind of the message that especially Denny was selling? Are they, again, another question about how overall do you think the jury, are they at least interested in the case?
If they are, they're not showing it.
Yeah.
They look bored to death.
Yeah.
And I am thinking, like, how much of this are they sitting there like, this doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I think it's good when they can make the parallels to, like, the Chargers being like renting an apartment versus permanent being like owning a house. Stuff like that. Anything you can do to get rid of all this lingo that we have in NASCAR and just break it down to simpler terms, I think will do wonders for one side or the other. But they look bored, but it's long days, to be fair. Like, seeing them after 8 hours of sitting there, I don't blame them.
When it comes to the body language, the beginning of the day, I noticed that a lot of them were just sitting up. They were focused, kind of helping out Hamlin's favor, I guess, because it didn't start off with cross-examination. It started off with Hamlin finishing his own examination and the plaintiff examination, and then moving on into the cross-examination later on. And then, of course, by the end of the day, I saw people kind of leaning back. One guy had his head like this. Mm-hmm. Look, they're jurors, right? They're the jury. Like, jury duty sucks. I think, they can go home and say, I'm on the jury for to their family. I'm on the jury for a Michael Jordan case, a case involving Michael Jordan. But to Massie's point, a lot of what we're saying might not even matter because we know what they're saying. We know what's going on because we cover sport. We know what everything. We know the verbiage. We know the dialogue. But when people say things like charter, and I think it was one of the attorneys that said it today. I think it was his first attorney that said today, like, the jury doesn't know what the hell a charter. I think Hamlin actually said it. The jury doesn't know what the hell a charter is. They have to explain that to them. And the word charter was thrown around probably about 4,000 times today. So you have to illustrate that a little bit better. And look, sometimes it's hard for me to explain. It's hard for me to explain to somebody else what a charter is because you can't even compare it to football, like football teams. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, so luckily I live with someone who knows zero about NASCAR. So I've been able to explain it. I just call it franchises. Like, at the end of the day, I say a charter is like a franchise.
It's not permanent ones.
Yes, essentially. And I think that's the best way to put it is that they are franchises, and you treat it as such. It's like this is as if like a single like Michael Massie decided to sue the Green Bay Packers because he thought the Green Bay Packers were being unfair to him. but the Packers are not a monopoly. So that is kind of what we're getting here, but also not what we're getting here. It's not an apples to orange comparison, but we are hitting 5 minutes less than the hour mark, fellas. I know it's been a long day for you guys. You got to get Dalton. You're going to be up in the morning, back in the courtroom. By the way, if you want more thoughts, Michael Massey's thoughts on this, you can listen to the morning warm up on VTRN Sports. Just want to selfless plug that. But Dalton, you're back there in the morning. So good news for you, buddy. You will join me tomorrow night. We'll be doing this all over again for day 3 of the trial. Before we get on out of here, anything else from today or your overall kind of sense of where this trial is going that we might have missed before we get on out of here?
I'll give you a little tease for something that may be upcoming in it, and that's that after Judge Bell released the jury, he addressed both lawyers saying that like they had gotten a message. I want to say they got it like 2:30 in the morning or something, requesting that the financials of the teams not involved in the case, they have to give a testimony, like a Rick Hendrick, a Roger Penske, Rick Childress, that their financials not be, publicly released, since it has no bearing on the case. And basically, Kessler was like, well, I had no plans to do it, but if they're going to use them as witnesses to basically trumpet this charter system and how great it is, then I'm going to have to drop them. And he did say, like, I won't get into specifics, like down to the penny or anything, and Judge Bell was like, yeah, we don't want to keep anything private in this case. Like, we want it all to be just public knowledge. So I think you're going to see if NASCAR tries to get these guys, Penske, Childress, Hendrick, to really say how great this charter system is, Kessler's going to be ready for it with, bam, you lost this much money. You lost this much money. So that's going to be interesting to watch.
And we'll have the best possible coverage for you, the fans, because we love you guys. And so tomorrow, Paul, by the way, this is Paul, 7 p.m. And Paul, you were the one I actually sort of shouted out. I am taking notes, man. I've been taking notes this whole time. All right, Paul, we shout out to Dalton. So Dalton and I tomorrow, 7 p.m. right here for edition 3 of this. Michael Massey has to go back home because he has a job, and we all do have jobs. So some of us, but we appreciate him for that. So thanks so much for you guys listening. Hopefully we answered as much as your questions as we can. David, about being able to see the documents, I am not exactly sure. Just follow Bob Pockris on Twitter. He basically releases all of them, so that's what I would say. So shout out to Bob. Shout out to Bob there. But for Michael Massey and Dalton Hopkins, fellas, get some rest. I know today was a long day for you guys. Make sure you're following them tomorrow on Twitter at PitLaneCPT. See, Dalton, I did get you in there today. At M_Massey22. I'm Trey Lyle, signing off for this episode of Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle.